you are in the world on another episode with a special guest. And I am going to let her introduce herself. I know her name is Shirley, but she will say the whole thing herself. Please go ahead and welcome Shirley to the show with me, but let her introduce herself.
Well, Mona, thank you for having me. My name is Shirley Xiaoling Wang, and I'm glad to be here. I was born and raised in Taiwan. My parents are from China and also grew up partially in America. So I consider myself a Chinese American. And I'm a professional musician. I'm an opera singer and a pianist. I also teach. And during the pandemic, I also started creating a curriculum for children who were born in the US to learn how to speak and understand Chinese culture. Just very happy to be here, Mona. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Shirley. Maybe I should sign up for that class too.
It'd be really fun. It just definitely is fun.
Excellent. Well, the topic of this episode is US China cultural clash and the impact of coronavirus or China virus on the Asian American population. My first question to you is, since the start of this coronavirus
Mhm.
pandemic, have you or anyone you know experienced any uncomfortable interactions and situations with others stemming from the fact that you are an Asian American?
Well, I personally have had an experience that was unpleasant, and this is unfortunate because of the rhetoric that's being expressed. And well, this was in March. I live in the state of Florida. During the last part of March, the month of March, the state was shut down. This was just maybe a week or two before this happened. And the New York City has already been under siege with the virus, and it was a very difficult time for everyone. And emotions were high. People weren't sure what was going on. And the rhetoric of the Chinese or the China virus was beginning to really bubble up to the surface. I was standing in line at the pharmacy to get a prescription filled, and I was not feeling well. I was wearing a mask. A man came right up to me to my face. And this is already after the CDC has announced the practice is 6 feet apart from each other. And he pointed his fingers right to my face and say, "You are full of propaganda. You are responsible for this." And it was physically threatening and verbally threatening to me. And unfortunately, nobody else seemed to wanted to do anything to help me. But it just so it happened. It was unintentional, but kind of fantastic and hilarious. I was there because I was not feeling well, so I broke into this horrible fit of cough, and which is why I was there to get a prescription for. And this poor man was so frightened because I start coughing like crazy. Here's a person who looks Asian, who was wearing a mask, who was coughing like there's no tomorrow. He scurried away right away. But that was an unpleasant experience that had its own karma.
I'm sure it did. But
Right.
seriously, how much of a gut you must have to go to a stranger and just tell him something like what the man told you? I mean, what propel people to tell others or point fingers at them that they're responsible for what's happening? I mean,
I think it's coming from a place of pain and a place of uncertainty, the lack of knowledge. And I think that's one way of manifesting it because it makes a person feel like now they're empowered to do something active about it. Because I think when we're feeling helpless and feeling like we're in the dark, and the one word that come to mind is ignorance.
uh,
When we're in the darkness, we're ignorant of what's going on. So when you're able to do something proactive, it feels like you now reclaim some of your power. And I also think there's been some undercurrent issues that's been happening over time. It's not. This is just something that gave it a voice. And but on the other hand, it also opened up a lot more dialogues between me and my friends. A lot of my friends start asking me questions, what my thoughts are, and how the Chinese people are actually doing in China. And I think it's an opportunity for a choice. We
mhm.
can choose to act out because we're scared, or we can choose to learn because we're scared.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And you mentioned a word that we have previously discussed, and that is ignorance.
Right.
Right. And I did share with you uh, the fact that when I arrived to this country, or the United States, I met a really nice man in college, educated, and he asked me where I was from. Then I told him I was from Morocco, and his facial expression just changed. Where the hell is that? And I thought to myself, wow, an educated man, supposedly in college, does not know where Morocco was. I personally was offended, to be honest with
Sure, I
you.
understand. I get
How,
it.
how could you not know where, to me, this place where I was born and I hold dear in my heart. And this man is telling me that he didn't know where it was. That was a bit insulting. And I said to myself, what an ignorant this man is. If you ask somebody, uh, a kid, 7 years old, and you tell him, okay, tell me where this place is located at. Tell me the capital, and you can point out or you can show him the entire world and ask him where every country is, where the capital is, and he would tell you. And I'm asking myself, this man supposedly in college does not know what the location. But then today I look back and I wouldn't call that person ignorant anymore just because we wouldn't be fair to that person. What
Mhm.
if he has never had interaction with anybody outside of his group, his circle? And that goes for a lot of people in
Very
America.
true. Very
It goes for
true.
a lot of people. I think we have to be understanding when people tell us things that we're not really expecting or expected to hear.
Hmm.
We have to take a step back, assess it in a different way before we respond.
I
If
think so.
right, if somebody is someone or a group of people in the middle of a small town of 2,000 people living there, I mean, are you expecting that person to know about the world, to know about Asia, to know about
Right.
Africa, to know about uh, Latin America? I think
Hmm.
I think we have to assess this differently. And I want to point that out just because of the word ignorant. I think we
Right.
have to be really careful when we
Hmm.
use that word in what capacity as
Right.
well, right?
Hmm.
Would you
Because
like
I
to?
think there is a right, because the whole topic today is about the rhetoric. So there are certain words which are has a tendency to be inflammatory because of the association with the word,
Yeah.
right? So when you say something like this person is ignorant, there is a automatic assumption of certain negative aspects to it,
Yeah.
and yeah, I have very similar experiences as you because I was born and raised in Taiwan.
Uh-huh.
And often people will say, "Oh yeah, she's Thai from Taiwan." I say, "No, I'm not Thai, and I'm from Taiwan, but Taiwan is not Thailand."
Yes.
So, but on the other hand, people are trying, and it's interesting because recently I read a book about communication, and
Uh-huh.
that when there's a difference between boundaries
Uh-huh.
and walls. When we
Uh-huh.
have walls, then we stop communicating. And when we have boundaries, it creates security and safety for people to really have a conversation. Then we take on the role of being an investigator,
Uh-huh.
and then we recognize what we would like to do is to have a communication, understand where the other person's coming from, and we have the ability because of the boundaries to filter what we agree and disagree with and be okay with the disagreements and the agreements. And I think that calls for sometimes taking a moment to take a breath
Yes.
and before we respond and go, okay, you know what? This person is really trying. They're trying to find something to say so they can relate to me. And this is my opportunity and maybe to my responsibility to
Yeah.
have a dialogue and say, hey, yeah, well, thank you for trying to get to know me. I'm actually Chinese, and Taiwan is a separate country from Thailand. It used to be part of China for hundreds of years.
Uh-huh.
And but I'm so glad you are so interested in kind of getting to know my cultural background. And then hopefully it didn't embarrass the other person too much. We can actually continue the conversation, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm going to go. I know we have limited time, so I'll
Sure.
go to the next question. When individuals use the word China virus to describe the coronavirus, how does that sound to the people, not only Asian Americans here or Chinese Americans, but people over in China? I mean, they've heard it on the news. How do
Well,
they
I
react to it?
I think the Asian Americans in the United States have had a different response to it because of the impact on us is different than the people who are in China. So
Yes,
during this time, I have been keeping up with the news both from the United States and also in China, as well as in Hong Kong and Taiwan. And I feel very privileged to be able to watch everybody's response, as well as having actual conversations with real people from those particular parts of the world. And China, much like the United States, is one of the greatest and biggest nations in this world. And they don't care if you call this the China virus. They may be a little bit offended,
yeah,
but they're very confident in who they are. And as a matter of fact, the news is filled with, the Americans, they have the greatest technology and the most advantage and a lot of medical advances. But look how they are managing this whole thing. And they're very proud of the way, the Chinese people are very proud of the way they managed it.
yeah.
And so I think for the Chinese people in China, it just sort of kind of like a joke. But unfortunately, this rhetoric has affected some of the quality of life for some of the Asian Americans in this country.
Yes, yes, I did see the video from the high school, I believe high school student from Winter
Yes.
Park. Right?
Yes.
It was very touching.
Mm-hmm. And
And I'm sure because what you're saying really makes sense to me. It makes sense to other people. It just when it's the same thing when some terrorist attack happen, the impact on Muslim Americans is devastating. Yes, you can go outside of here and people say, we're not related to any of that. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's sad thing to know, but it has nothing to do with us. But the impact, the biggest impact is on the people living here. So I do understand exactly what you're saying. It can be devastating. It can be overwhelming. It can be depressing as well. Right. So
right.
you mentioned something about pride.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that?
You mentioned something about pride for the Chinese people. They have so much pride in what they do, um, and I would like to explore a little bit more about the Chinese culture as far as what is it that we need to understand about you, about people from other part of Asia that look like you.
Right.
Okay, because when we're talking about Asia, these are this is a giant continent
Mm-hmm.
with so many beliefs, so many ethnicities, so many languages, so many people that may in one part look similar, but in other parts totally different.
Right.
So what can we learn about your cultures?
Well, I think for one, it's really important to acknowledge not all Asian people are the same.
Mhm.
And I know in our previous conversation you have asked me about what can people learn if they were to do business with people who are Asians, and
Yes.
from various and the answer was it's like going to visit in somebody's home, right? And you start to observe and respect people's boundaries and their practices and their traditions. And so if you were to go to Asia to do business in various Asian countries, it's really a good idea to find a cultural ambassador who doesn't just translate the language for you, but who can help you to understand the finer interactions and understand what they mean. And because I think a lot of times we have the greatest intention not to offend, but we end up doing something. And I also think people always appreciate others being curious and compassionate to want to learn about who they are. And then the reverse is also true. I think you will find that most Asian people who immigrated to America really make an effort to learn the language, albeit sometimes it's with accents and incorrect grammatic uses. We are trying, and we're not here to take your jobs, but one thing about the Asian culture is we really believe in efforts. We believe in excellence. We believe in efforts. And sometimes a result of that is really good grades or really good job or the successful businesses. But that is not because we're trying to compete and take something away. It is simply a concept of survival and wanting to create something as a legacy for the next generation, wanting to create something better for the children. And so I think those are things that it's great to keep in mind, and just be compassionate and open-minded with each person at a personal level, I think.
Yes. Uh, and that takes me to the next thing because we have discussed this before, and the fact that Asian Americans, or mostly Chinese Americans, when they came over to the U.S., they
Mhm.
didn't have much choices, and that's what led them to be in restaurants business. A lot of,
Mhm.
and I've worked with so many. I've worked with Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipinos, and so many from Asia. And I do understand that every country is different than the other.
Mm,
Every cultural, subcultural aspect of a country is different than the other. I do
very much
understand
so.
that perfectly. But what I wanted to elaborate on is the fact that we have so many Chinese restaurants in the United States. Yeah, and people love the food. I
Mhm.
love the food. Okay, I go to, well, I used to, not now, but I used to go to uh, Chinese buffet, and I love the variety. I love the diversity. I love the taste. And a lot of Americans and a lot of people from other cultural backgrounds share the same feeling. Yet they never are curious to know about who the Chinese are. And you had shared with me that why are we finding several Chinese people going into restaurant business? And you can explain that is
Sure.
because they didn't have option, right? They didn't have
Well,
option
it's
where.
or rather, I think it's the determination to discover options because a lot of the early Chinese immigrants were here because they were here to build a railroad,
Uh-huh.
and it was a very difficult situation. And those people were adventurous people who
Mhm.
wanted to create a better future. They were going to give it as a try, and they were
Uh-huh.
also Chinese in the culture has been traditionally being we're into saving. We're not into spending, so they
Yes.
saved their money from building the railroads,
Uh-huh.
and they realized they couldn't keep doing this forever. They need to find another way. They need to be able to bring their families to the States so the family can reunite, and they need to also create a future. So, what they discovered through studies and researches, even back then, was
Uh-huh.
the immigration law had a clause that said, if you are a specialized personnel with extraordinary abilities, then you can come to this country and get a status to stay. And people who work for restaurants with specialized cuisines were considered to be one of those people. And if you own a restaurant and you're hiring people from China to work in that specialized profession, then
Uh-huh.
they get to come to this country legally. So
Uh-huh.
that was the early history. And additionally, as a business owner,
Uh-huh.
you would need verification letters from the verified vendors to say you're a legitimate business and this is how much business you're doing in this country. But being a business owner, they had to purchase a lot of supplies ongoingly, whether it's food based or it's equipment based. So they couldn't go to the Caucasian people at the time and get them to write those letters by asking them. But the people who they were buying from were willing to do so because they became such good customers. They always not only paid on time, but paid early, paid
Hmm.
with cash, and
Hmm.
ordered lots of quantities because they worked hard to build the business. So there is a consumption. So they want to keep the customer. So they will write those verification letters. And that's how they begin to bring the family members to the United States to work in the restaurants together, which is why you see traditionally, you see a lot of family members working together. And
Uh-huh.
as a community, there was a knowledge sharing. So they helped others in the community to open up restaurants across the country so they
Uh-huh.
can find a way to build a better future for themselves and for their children and bring their family over. It's not any different than the founding fathers and the first people who came to the United States to start this country.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. And that exactly this is what you just said. It just shows how much pride, responsibility, accountability, and also discipline in
Mm,
what Asian do and what Asian, how Asians do things. And we need to appreciate that. Really, a lot of people need to understand and appreciate where are they coming from and why are they working this hard, not taking your jobs. Why are they working this hard to excel in life? This is important to them, important for their families and for future generation. And that should be celebrated by all of
right.
us, right? So, is there, I feel, and I can be wrong, is there a culture clash between the US and China? Um, Talk to us about that a bit.
I think there's a lot of assumptions, and that's where most of the time any types of clashes happen, right? It's based on assumptions and also based on the feeling of competition because we're talking about two of the greatest nations in this world. Both are really large in its size and
Yeah.
its economic abilities, its military abilities,
Mhm.
and its impact in this world. So there is a natural tendency of being competitive and want to be one up. So a lot of those clashes, I don't know how much of it is a cultural clash, how much of it is really a competition and looking to almost like they like two kids who got in the fight and start pointing yo mama this kind of thing with a cultural clash is really kind of pointing fingers to get a one up and that's I do think there is a cultural clash, but I think it's as much of a political clash as much of an international competitive clash as it is a cultural clash.
Yes, your answer is right. And always the problem that we, the people, do not differentiate between or from is the fact that politics
Mm,
play a big role in how we think about others.
right.
Because we all, most of us, at least most of us, get their news from TV, from mainstream media.
Hmm.
And whatever they are reporting to us is what we deem to be correct. And sometimes it is not. It's far away from the truth. It is what they want us to believe. And that's what people have to really differentiate and take a little bit more time in investigating and doing more research to have the actual truth of the matter.
Right.
So, to the people that are listening to us right now, if they have um, misunderstanding, some assumptions about Chinese, about Asians, what would you tell them?
Well, um, I'm going to reverse it a little bit. I'm going to say what I like to do when somebody comes at me with a rhetoric like the Chinese virus and all that stuff is I believe in taking a breath before I respond because I think it should be taken as an opportunity at a grassroots level, on a person to person level, to really have a communication, to have a dialogue, which by definition is two ways, not
Yes.
one. And and what I would think would be wonderful is if more people become aware and willing to take that breath
Hmm.
before they respond. and
Mhm.
maybe consider the possibility of not taking an attack angle, but a problem solving angle, communicative angle, empathic angle, a compassionate angle. I realize this virus doesn't recognize the color of your skin.
Mhm.
It's just going to come after you if you're exposed, and we can be so helpful with each other, and we can be in this together.
Yes, absolutely. What can we do? What can American do to help Asian Americans going through this pandemic and going through this unprecedented time, and maybe attacks against whoever looks Chinese, looks Asian? What can we do to help them?
I think
What can we do?
awareness. I
Mhm.
think awareness and be willing to actually have a conversation. Take a breath, have a conversation. And what I also think is really important is I believe it's a trickle down effect. If the parents and the grandparents in the homes are speaking in a way that is derogatory and prejudicial in their homes, the children are going to pick up. Like the video you have mentioned that I shared with you, my friend's son, who's actually half Caucasian and half Japanese American. And but he was attacked when he goes out. People tell him to go back to your own country. Well, this is his country. But where did they get those ideas? Those are teenagers who are calling those things out. They are young kids. So I think what will be truly helpful is for the parents and the grandparents and the teachers to take a moment to take a breath
Yes.
and think about how we're expressing ourselves and how it's affecting people of the next generation, because we're not looking at what's going to happen when the pandemic is over next year. We're
Mhm.
looking at 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years from now, the impact of this rhetoric to our next generation and how we can or cannot get along. Are we separated from each other or are we connected?
Yes. And then this is when I say cultural intelligence is so important, is more important than ever before. And
Mm,
I do believe that it has to be mandatory in schools since young age, because with all the events that we had in the past year, something popped up that's called diversity and inclusion. And it's only taught to adults in businesses, corporation. But what I see happening, and with so many stories that I hear, this diversity inclusion is not solving the problem. It's just checking the box to say that we have conducted this workshop. Yes, now we are inclusive, we are diverse, and we're happy. The reality is far from that. And I'm going to share something with you real quick. I had a lady that wanted to join our team. So when I spoke with her and I asked the question, so why are you planning to leave where you are at right now? Without going into details, one thing she said, her boss is very racist. Um, the whole, I don't want to go too much into details, but she said she was trying, she's Kurdish, and she grew up in London. Her clients and a lot of her family are in Turkey. So she has a very large base of clients from there that are willing to spend money in here. So here's what her boss said. And this boss is a high level executive at a government agency. And he told her, no, 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 no. We don't want people from that place. Go ahead and focus on bring people from Germany, from Denmark, from Norway. We don't want those kind of people in there. And I thought that was so wrong. So when we are, and I want to get your thought about this diversity and inclusion, I think is geared towards a certain group, small group, but is not so much the diverse society we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced anything um, that you recently, or any event that you recently attended, that you can confirm this? Because I truly believe these diversity inclusion workshops are not serving the purpose. How can we help someone unlearn what he has or she has been learning all her life, all his life?
Well, I think it's really a two-part answer. I'll share a story with you first, and then I'll share some additional thoughts after. Back in February, I attended a really big interfaith event in Winter Park, Florida, and there was a big conversation about diversity and inclusion. And
Uh-huh.
all those people stood up in the room of 200 some people saying, look at this room. This is a representation of lack of diversity. There's not a single minority person in this room. I was sitting right there. And the people around me start pointing out to say, she's here, she's minority. And two types of minority, being Asian and being female, right? But they continue to ignore my existence, my presence in the room. They proceeded to have almost 2 hours worth of conversation on how they can be more inclusive and how they increase their diversity in how they run those events and similar activities, while proactively excluded me from,
Yeah.
really, they're not interested in hearing from me. And then afterwards, on the way to the ladies' room, and it was as if the Red Sea was parted in front of me. They all saw me coming, and their eyes averted eye contact. And no one wanted to look me in the eyes. And I thought, you know what, if you would just look me in my eyes and ask how I feel at this moment, because what you just did, you would learn something about effective policy making and practices for diversity, because you just did the opposite after this 2 hour extremely meaningful conversation about how to make it better. And but on the other hand, this is a second part I do want to go into a little bit is, but why was that? Why did this happen? I do believe those people had the best of intentions. I don't think they did that in order to demote the idea of diversity and inclusion. I believe they wanted to. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend 2 hours of their life talking about such topics exclusively. People will not run workshops and invest money into something if they really don't think there is some merit to it. But
Yeah.
why are they not looking me in my eyes? So I think that is really where I personally would like to have more conversation about, is to address the more fundamental reasons, which I believe is fear, is some level of fear and the discomfort of things which are unknown. They are not sure how this is going to change their lives. They are not sure if they will fail if they try. And I think the fear of failures and the fear of changes and the fear of what they don't know have prevented them from including me in my opinion, because they're afraid of what I would say.
Yeah.
And what can I do to help them to be more comfortable so we can have a conversation?
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right. Um, that takes me to, I can say, a question or common observation.
Mm-hmm.
Is the system, is our system
Mm-hmm.
making differentiations between groups? Is it meant to include some people and exclude others? And that's what comes to mind, because when I hear about diversity inclusion and I listen to people, speakers talking on this topic,
Mm-hmm.
there's only certain groups. But we are talking about the world that has more than 8 billion people. So you're telling me, and America is representative of that world. We have everyone from every part of the world we can think of. They're here. They work here. They get up every day. They work hard. They pay taxes. They contribute to the growth of the economy. Why are we not acknowledging them? Why are we not including them? So, in essence, I am thinking that whatever we are doing here is really making more differences, creating more differences,
Okay.
creating more divisions, because there's always certain group that is included and others are excluded. Would you agree with me?
I think that's part of human nature, right? You go to schools, the kids form cliques, and nobody taught them to do so. And I have to say, I do think Americans do a better job to make an effort
Hmm.
to be more inclusive, and but it's not an easy job. And one of the, I think we have the official system,
Yes.
and then we have the unofficial system of how the society, how the world actually works. I think the official system is not set up to do the diversity and the inclusion too well. But one of the greatest things about the United States and its culture is its ability to work from the grassroots level. And I think if we focus more on that and start to have more conversations from that level,
Uh-huh.
I think I think differences can be made from bottom up because that is how this country was made to begin with.
Yes. Yes. I'm taking your point and I'm taking it very well. Um, as we both may have different experiences and different encounters, but we both can work together to make things better in our community, in our city, in our country, right?
You're making a difference with what you're doing today.
Oh my
You're
God.
making a difference by doing this today. It takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to do this podcast on this topic. I'm going to find a person to talk about this. I'm going to be public and open about this. And in this country, you can do it, and it's going to go on the internet. It's not going to get censored, or maybe, I'm not sure, but you get to do it, and you can share it privately or publicly with as many people as you want. And it's not true in every country in this world.
I do agree. And we
Mm.
both know that.
Right.
Right? Yes, we both know that. And I mean, we are very appreciative of the opportunities we have in this country. And I tell people every day, be grateful. This is the best country in the world. And when this division is happening and we're seeing so many clashes on TV and media, and everyone is so tensioned for no reason, I said, folks, take a deep breath.
Right.
Look,
Take a breath.
look, take a deep breath. Look at what you have.
Hmm.
You have so many blessings and you have so many opportunities that people elsewhere will die for.
Hmm.
Appreciate it. Not only appreciate it, but guard it with
Right.
your heart and soul. And let's work together to make it better for everyone, not just one or two or three groups of
Right.
people, for everyone.
And I believe you're right. The official system, whether it's the corporate system or the governmental system, they're not effective. But
Mhm.
I think we need to focus on what works
Yeah.
and be proactive and participate, show up, right?
Yes. And then thank you for showing up.
Well, thank you for having me. So I get to show up. I really appreciate it.
Yes. A last question. I'm always with last questions, but they're never last. You said you were from Taiwan. Tell
Hmm.
us, tell people the difference between Taiwan and China. If they've never been to Taiwan, if they've never been to China, tell them the location. What is particular about Taiwan that you don't see in China, and vice versa? That way, we can understand more about your culture and background.
Absolutely. Taiwan is its own country, 100% independent, and we have been our own country for over 100 years. And we have our own government, and we're democratic. We have multiple parties, political parties, and we are economically independent, have our own military power. And but culturally, we are Chinese, and we used to be a province of China hundreds of years ago. And so culturally, we speak the same language, we have the same heritage, the same blood flows in us as the people from China. And but it's its own country, and it's been independent for a very long time. And because it is democratic, so we perceive our rights very differently, and we appreciate and cherish those rights. And of course, now while we're economically independent, we're also interdependent, just like the way the U.S. is interdependent with China in a lot of manufacturing efforts,
Yes.
etc. And
Mhm.
because China has the resources, and now China has been its own country as well for over 5,000 years, and the territory has expanded and shrunk throughout history for many times through different dynasties. And I remember sharing with you, it's like we're two siblings from the same family, and now
Yes.
we're all grown up, and we have our own families, but the same blood, the same tradition, the same culture, the same language, and many of the same thoughts run through our body, our thoughts, our minds, our spirits, because we share it from the same parents, but we have our own independent households, and we
Yes.
don't. Yeah, we don't just go to the other person's house and say, "Well, this is mine." You shouldn't, right?
Yes. So, and if we want to have a Taiwanese food and have the taste of Taiwanese culture, do we go to Chinese food or what do we do?
You can actually literally Google Taiwanese restaurants. And I know we both happen to be neighbors here in Orlando, Florida. If you Google Taiwanese restaurants, you're going to find several right in your backyard, because there are two right by UCF, and I love them. They're wonderful.
It's just for people to understand. Thai cuisine is not Taiwanese cuisine, right?
I'm
The,
sorry, can you repeat that?
the Thai cuisine is not
Oh, no.
Taiwanese cuisine.
No,
It's
it's a different
totally,
country.
yes,
It's
because
like saying, the Portuguese and the Spanish are the same thing.
exactly, exactly. I so much enjoyed our talk, and I will ask you for your final thoughts on this uh, subject. And what can you tell people? How can we do it better? How can we live in harmony? How can we love each other? And share with us what's in your mind.
I think that's a utopian goal we'd like to reach. And in the meantime, I think if we could all try to take a breath, you know, when something comes at us, let's say for me, when somebody comes at me pointing their fingers to me and or start talking about the China virus,
Uh-huh.
instead of react, take a moment to take a breath. Understand why you're doing that. How can I make this a dialogue? Two
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
And I choose a response that's not attack and fear based. And I really hope more people are willing to make that choice from all directions, because I think this has made a lot of impact, not just on the Asian looking people in America. It's made an impact on the people who are pointing their fingers and saying this is the China virus. It's made an impact on African Americans, on the Latinos in this country. And it's created a lot of fears and separation, but can we just maybe enough of us willing to take a breath, doing what you're doing, take a breath, step back, and see if we can start a conversation. And I just truly believe if we do that, changes will happen over time.
Yes, yes, I absolutely agree with you. I always say I am the voice of peace. I am the voice of cultural intelligence. I am the voice of harmony and voice of growth, not just growth for myself, but growth for others. So, with that, we will conclude. And I do remember you telling me, Ting Ting, is it?
谢谢，谢谢。
谢谢, 谢谢. Thank you so much for your time. Just for those who are watching or will be watching this episode, We did it earlier today and we failed to record it, so we're doing it again. Excellent work, good perspective, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your time, and just the fact that you open up your heart and mind to everybody. That is just a wonderful thing.
Well, Mona, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for creating this dialogue and this conversation. And I'm honored to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. 谢谢。
谢谢. Have a great weekend.